Good afternoon to everyone. It's very good to see such a very full room here today, and welcome also to the panelists. Welcome to today's session on protecting academic freedom worldwide, the role of science diplomacy and research security. My name is Nienke Buisman. I'm heading the International Cooperation Unit in DG Research and Innovation, stepping in today for our Deputy Director General, Ms. Signe Razzo, who was called to an important meeting in the Berlaymont, unfortunately, but we do our best. The topics that we're going to discuss in this session today with the three amazing panelists are arguably among the hottest topics, we think, in science policy at the moment. And probably the big turnout today is evidence of this. We only have 30 minutes, unfortunately, but the panel is great. As I said, let me present the panelists to you. So first of all, Mr. Robert Dijkgraaf, President-elect of the International Science Council and former Dutch Minister of Education, Culture and Science. Welcome. Secondly, we have Ms. Stéphanie Balm, Director of the Center for International Studies at Sciences Po in Paris. And finally, Mr. James Hammond, Professor of Geophysics at Birkbeck, University of London, who published last week a comment in Nature on why global geopolitics should not stall science. Originally, we were also hoping to have Professor Shalini Randeria with us, who until recently served as president and rector of Central European University. However, unfortunately, she's stuck with COVID, so she couldn't make it. We wish her all the best. After a first round of statements by our speakers, we will open the debate to all of you and the people online with questions. And for this, we will use Slido, as you can see on the screen. But before giving the floor and asking our questions to the panelists, allow me to kick off this discussion a little bit on our side. Academic and scientific freedom are ingrained in the EU's core values and are among the key assets that attract researchers to Europe. However, they're under pressure worldwide, not just in authoritarian regimes, and not just outside of the European continent. Many researchers face political interference and pressure linked to ideology, societal polarization. For example, the European Commission has repeatedly voiced its concerns regarding undue political interference in Hungary, and we watch with great preoccupation also the developments in Serbia, for example. These challenges undermine not only individual rights, but also the credibility and the excellence of the entire science system. And we believe that only if researchers are free to ask bold questions, to challenge accepted wisdom, and to publish their results without fear, science can deliver the innovations that citizens actually need, that citizens expect. And this is also why the European Parliament, in its resolution of January 2024, called for stronger safeguards to protect researchers' autonomy and independence. And our president, Ms. von der Leyen, has confirmed the Commission's intention to follow up with a legislative proposal and make it part of the Choose Europe for Science agenda. We believe that it's even more important in a world that is characterized by shifts in the geopolitical as well as the scientific landscape. Research and innovation increasingly translate into power and geopolitical influence. And against this backdrop, we will discuss how the EU can use science diplomacy to promote academic and scientific freedom worldwide, and how, at the same time, these can be protected by appropriate research security measures. You may have seen our recent report, a European Framework for Science Diplomacy, that clearly advocates that science diplomacy should be used to promote the principles and values that the EU stands for, And we hope to be able to launch in the coming period a call for evidence for a future Council recommendation on science diplomacy. Finally, at the same time, there is increasing awareness that research and innovation must be shielded from undue influence by foreign actors. And this is why the EU adopted last year the Council recommendation on enhancing research security, which provides guidance on how to manage these risks at the EU level. We believe that together these documents will equip the EU to respond to today's challenges and not least related to academic and scientific freedom. So this said, let's go to our panelists. First question goes to Professor Dijkgraaf. You have had a distinguished scientific career, served as a science minister in the Netherlands, and you will lead the International Science Council as of next year. How would you describe the current situation of academic and scientific freedom worldwide? Which are the main challenges?
Well, thank you for asking the question. And by the way, also thank you for arranging this panel discussion on a topic which I think is really at the heart of what Europe stands for. And the short answer is, how would I characterize the situation of academic freedom? Well, it's not good. We see growing and unprecedented attacks on academic freedom. Individual scholars are being threatened, both online and physical. I think half the climate scientists and virologists were under pressure. We see populist movements portraying universities, which were always celebrated as an essential pillar of democracy, as elitist institutions that indoctrinate students with woke ideology. The scientific consensus on important issues as climate and biodiversity is undermined deliberately by dis and misinformation. It's often disguised very cleverly as kind of fake science. I think what is kind of being eroded is what I would say is the foundation of our societies, which is the common perception of empirical reality. Governments, and I think also here in Europe, building the power of the purse, increasingly look at science through a very narrow lens of economic interest and competitiveness. And that means that policies are skewed towards immediate short-term goals, and the long-term benefits of science are forgotten. And particular fields like the humanities and social scientists are often marginalized, while I think they're absolutely crucial, not only guiding technological advance, but also discussing this particular topic. But I think most alarmingly is that science is under pressure, but international collaboration is also under pressure. I see many countries having an inward-looking trend. There's a zero-sum view of the world. Scientific collaboration is often framed as a threat to national security, to economic interests, while we know that all the big challenges need collaboration. I like to say globalization works in science. So these days, I think not only scholars, but also international networks, data even, are under attack. And there's an ironic part to this, because I think it's partly you can explain all these pressures because of the success of science. You see the areas that are most under threat are the ones that are making the biggest impact. So sometimes I joke it's a little bit like Newton's third law, action is reaction. Science is pushing societies, and society is pushing back. So I think that is, for us, I think not only a moment to see what's happening in the world, but I think also a moment for at least the scientific community to step up. Because one thing I feel is very, very important, that as scientists, you neither want to be naive nor paranoid. So clearly, all of these developing science that has such a tremendous impact on the world, you need to do it in a delicate, balanced way. But still, I feel this is a moment where also the scientific community has to learn about what's happening in society, how to orient ourselves, and particularly, how do we make sure that the support base for science, I think we all agree science is crucial in solving our challenges, but the support base of science is still there in society.
Many thanks, Professor, for setting out these challenges. Let me turn to Professor Baum. You are a director of the Center for International Studies of Sciences Po and have plenty of experience also with China, including as a French science counselor in Beijing. Why, according to you, are both science diplomacy and research security important, and how can they help to protect academic and scientific freedom?
Thank you. Does it work? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the invitation, and welcome to everyone. This panel is, there are two concepts that needs to be defined: academic freedom, my colleague talked about it, and research security. What I have to tell you that I've just finalized a long report on academic freedom, trying to assess the situation worldwide, in Europe and in my country, France, to try to find solutions. And this report presents 65 recommendations, and among the 65, 1/3 of them are related to the European Union and to the European Commission, because I think we need help from Europe to help national scientific ecosystems at the EU level. We cannot do it nationally, I think. And I do believe that, one of the takeaway messages is that academic freedom and research security must be combined. It's not one against the other, it works together. And it works together to serve a certain conception of science, a sort of conceptions of, I would say, la science humaniste, humanist science. Science for development, and surely not techno-nationalism. Geopolitically speaking, the EU has a key role to play, facing China and the US, because they're the two other very important scientific ecosystems. For different reasons, these two scientific models are not are not completely in favor of supporting academic freedom, but they are very much into research security. And so Europe must absolutely create a system, create tools, invent tools precisely to show that we can remain democracies and strong scientific superpowers. Because what is at stake is for democracies to remain scientific superpowers and for superpowers to be democracies. And it's not what's going on right now. We need to fight things. We need to fight, I think, against it. So first of all, research security means different actors taking different decisions. It means mapping risks depending on countries, depending on disciplines. You mentioned social sciences. They're different from, let's say, hard sciences. To also create systems which are resilient so we can assess what's going on and change our policies. The key goal is to basically de-risk, but smartly. Smart de-risking, keeping our systems open, but depend in if it's a win-win situation for us. And we also think, and I don't want to be too long, so you tell me, but one of the recommendations that I proposed together with many colleagues, because there are also a lot of initiatives trying to find solutions at the EU level. We need a kind of observatory in Europe to try to understand what's going on locally and worldwide, to compare the situations, because situations are always the same everywhere, because the reasons why there are attacks on academic freedom are systematic. And I don't have time to develop this point here, but I think everybody probably knows about it. Secondly, we also need to really have a sort of world ranking system made by the European Union and not be dependent on other worldwide one, the Chinese one, the Times Higher Education one, the QS one. We need to have our own world ranking system. And we need within this world ranking system to have an index on academic freedom. Because if we start to rank many universities who are among the top 10 today, based on academic freedom, they might not be at the top, right, level. We need tools, we need training programs within universities. We have everything in place to really, I would say, to build up a very strong system including, for example, the Association of European Universities, who work really hard on academic freedom. So it's not a choice. It's not research security or academic freedom. It goes together, and it's very important for the excellency of science, and to make sure that 21st century science is not techno-nationalism only, but is made by scientists for the development of human good.
Many thanks, Professor Baum. Research security, academic freedom going hand in hand, not a choice. Thank you. Let me go to the last panelist, Professor Hammond. You are, as I said, a geophysicist, and you lead the Mount Pegtu Research Center at Birkbeck University of London. And to those of you who are not so firm in geography, like myself, Mount Pegtu is a volcano located on the border between North Korea and China. How, Professor, is your experience in working with North Korean scientists, and which role can science diplomacy play, according to you, in the relations with authoritarian regimes?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's always a bit odd that we have a research center named after a volcano that sits in London, that sits on the border of China and North Korea. But to give a bit of context, in 2011, myself and a colleague were invited to North Korea because this volcano is responsible for one of the biggest eruptions in human history, and it was showing signs of life. And so there was quite a lot of regional concern that this volcano may erupt again. It didn't, and it's quiet at the moment. But it started a 14-year ongoing collaboration with North Korean scientists. And this has been developed and sustained through quite a turbulent period of geopolitics on the Korean peninsula. And so we've really relied heavily on science diplomacy. We went into it as scientists. We came out as science diplomats from this project. But we've relied on huge support from people like the Royal Society and the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences, but also we have a British embassy in Pyongyang, and they've been instrumental in maintaining this project. And I'll give you one kind of direct example of why that was so useful to us. Was in 2016, we had just published our first paper led by a North Korean first author in Science Advances, probably the most high-profile paper ever published by a North Korean scientist. We just held a conference in Pyongyang, bringing about a dozen international scientists together with 40 North Korean scientists to explore new collaborations in environmental science. And then there was a nuclear test, a North Korean nuclear test. And the UN Security Council put new sanctions on North Korea that stopped all science engagement with North Korea. And so we thought that was the end of our project. And we went to the Foreign Office in London, and we met with the British ambassador to North Korea. And they said, look, we really value your project. It's great for us to have an engagement project with North Korea that's purely science-led. It helps us build relationships, trust, and understanding. We would like it to continue. And they said, with your permission, we'd like to work with the Security Council to understand how we can comply with these new sanctions, yet your work can continue. So we agreed with that. And in a very elegant diplomatic solution, there was a series of letters were exchanged between the UK mission to the UN and the UN Security Council, and our project did continue. So there was no exemptions given, but it was working within the sanctions. We explained that what we were doing, working on a volcano, didn't violate the spirit of the sanctions as they were written. And we could continue. And I see that probably as the biggest success of our project, actually. We've published papers. We have furthered our understanding of this volcano. We've worked with North Korean and Chinese scientists. But to maintain a project over 14 years, and we're still working on it today, I think that, to me, is the biggest success that we've achieved.
Many thanks, Professor, for sharing your experience, science diplomacy in practice. Let us now turn to the audience. As I said, we're taking the questions through Slido. We have them on the screen. I will read we can take 2 or 3, I think, maximum. So for the panelists to come in to say if you want to reply to the question. The first one, question that came in, is there real academic freedom when research proposals are shaped by flawed RA incentives? For example, needing to publish non-null results in high-impact journals. Who would like to come in on this?
Happy to take that one. I think it's a really good question. I think if we talk about attacks on academic freedom, we often think from external threats, but there's also internal threats. And in fact, the way the academic world is organized is largely self-governed. So some of these are self-inflicted wounds. And it's incredibly important for the scientific community also to stand up in terms of its own practices. And I think, there is in many ways, we are sometimes, victim to the kind of metrics that actually never ever came out of the government agencies, but it typically were coming out of the scientific community itself. So I think that's a very important item, and I think I would also include in here, certain cancel culture, etc. So I think, if you think in terms of threats, very good also to have this discussion inside. I think that's a very valid point.
Many thanks. Anyone who would like to add?
Maybe just add that there are different type of attacks. So there are really serious ones from social networks, from interferences from countries, from foreign countries, and there are problems and difficulties. But I think we really need to organize by categories the attacks on academic freedom. They're not all equal. And I think for those of you in the room understand quite well academic freedom, but during the study for my report, I realized how law is actually the culture in academic freedom, including in Europe. We think we know what it is, but we don't. But if we think in terms of freedom of expression or freedom of the press, we know clearly what it is. In my country, France, for example, there are two differences between journalists and researchers. There is a law for journalists, and it dates back to the end of the 19th century. And when something happens to a journalist, they all get together to protect themselves. And secondly, they have the protection of their data and their sources. Now, if tomorrow the French state asks me that I give to police the content of my research, I have to do so because there is no protection of sources and data in social sciences for researchers. So there is, the whole academic system is built, on goodwill. Is built based on, rule of law and democracy. But when rule of law and democracies are attacked, then we're not protected. So we need now to build up a system. So it's not only fighting because we need to do it, but also it's a great opportunity for a kind of democratic innovation. So protecting academic freedom is a way to basically protect democracy in general, because it's a particular, it's a right that we have as academics, but it's for the rest of the society. It's one more right for me, which helps democracies being strong. Without academic freedom, really democracies are really weak.
Many thanks for this. Let's move to a next question. What is the role of scientists in preserving information integrity faced with synthetic content provided by generative AI polluting information space? Are there any actions? And I don't see the third question because the timer is in front. But anyone likes to take this question?
I mean, I can comment on it, but more from a university perspective, because one of the things, this is not necessarily research, but one of the things we're seeing a lot now in universities are our students are using this, right? It's become part of the education experience. And I think there's an onus on us as universities to try and understand how we're going to embed this within the education. So the researchers of the future are going to use this in a responsible manner. And I don't think we have the answer to that yet, right? I certainly don't. But it's clearly a huge challenge that we're facing in the academic sector.
But I think talking about integrity is definitely important, because if we say academic freedom, it goes together with a sense of responsibility and integrity. I think of the International Science Council has produced one of the first report on precisely research responsibility, which goes together with academic freedom. This is only way to be legitimate. If we're asking to protect academic freedom, the opposite of it is to protect research integrity.
Just add to it, if you think about, what makes science and the academic world trustworthy, it's not that scientists are better people, but it's our whole ecosystem. It's the way in which we have debate, in which we do peer review, etc. And clearly now we also have to deal with AI being part of this big ecosystem. So I think this will again be a major change in how we think in terms of some sense the social processes that makes science it's having this unique position. And so I think that's clearly something that science systems are evolving, and I hope that a lot of scientists actually take interest in this, because they will have to co-evolve with all these new technologies.
Yeah. Very strong responsibilities also for scientists that you are underlining. I'm afraid we have to, we're coming to the end of the session already, so I would like to ask all of the panelists one final question, which is, what would be your main recommendation for the EU? Let's now start from the back. Okay. Professor Hammonds.
What an opportunity. So, yeah, we've been thinking recently a lot about how our work has implications for for science as we go into a world that's more geopolitically complicated, more fragmented. Sanctions right now are higher. The number of sanctions are higher than in any other time in history. Yet we face challenges like climate change, global health, that require us to work together, right? And the sanctions, for example, that were imposed on Russia recently, has had a tangible, measurable impact on science. There's increased biases in our models, understanding how permafrost is reacting to a warming climate, for example. And so I think, what we argued in the piece we wrote in Nature last week was, there's areas of science that we can still work together on that don't impact the targets of those sanctions, but mechanisms need to be put in place to reassure universities, to reassure researchers that they should continue, and that needs to be done by those that are imposing those sanctions, right? So we need those discussions and those debates to be happening now, so that when future decisions are made, we can try and minimize those impacts on those global challenges.
Thank you, Professor Baum.
That's a difficult question, super difficult question. So I make a choice, and I would say structuring, institutionalizing science diplomacy within EU foreign policy, thinking as a great power, as exactly what we are. I'm making science and market as being the two big reasons which helped the process of the building up the European Union. And I think it's time for science again to play this role. So EU science diplomacy, and as among the top one on the top of the agenda of the EU.
Many thanks, Professor Dijkgraaf.
Well, echoing those words, I think Europe has a very special role, not only to stand for science, but also for international collaboration, because by itself, it's a collaborative project. And it's an open collaborative project that has been grown. And there are some major superpowers in the world, but there are many, many more other countries that are looking for reliable research alliances. And I think Europe has a tremendous role here to play. And I think my key message to Europe be, please involve the scientists themselves in all the decisions that you go on making, whether it's about research security, whether it's about science diplomacy. We, as scientific community, we might be sitting in the second ring, like politicians are sitting in the first ring, which are called the splash zone. But in the second ring, I think actually, in these very difficult times, have an incredible role to play. We saw some wonderful examples. So I think Europe should actually support those efforts.
Many thanks to the three panelists. So we need to involve scientists. Research is to continue. and science should have a stronger role in foreign policy. Many thanks also to the audience. Thank you all. I know that for this topic, let me use the last 17 seconds. For this topic, we can spend a whole day talking about it, and this is why I would like to announce 2 upcoming conferences. One, the European Flagship Conference on Research Security, end of October. Professor Dijkgraaf is also speaking at this conference. And then finally, the European Science Diplomacy Conference with the Danish presidency happening in December in Copenhagen. Will be 2 opportunities to discuss these topics further. Many thanks to all, many thanks to the panelists.
Thank you.